So hi guys, I'm Amy-Louise Wilson. I work at North East Scotland College and I'm a digital learning advisor. So with the advent of ChatGPT, it kind of led me to go back to when I was a student, and if I were a student, what would I want to be doing with a tool like this? Wasn't too long ago that I was a student, and when I was a student, we had forms of AI. It was, simple things like being able to generate content for social media was a big thing. Background removal, things like that were available, and I used it a lot as a student, but it was never at kind of this level. So if I was a student, kind of what would I be doing? So a little quick presentation. We've already discussed a lot of this today with the problems that AI can pose, how we can help students use AI. And then I've also got I had a questionnaire that I sent out to students, and I met with a class and we discussed a little bit about this. So a little bit of their feedback as well on here. So main potential risks, we've already kind of talked about cheating. It's kind of our main one, but there's other risks as well. One is that students can become overly dependent on the technology. They'll use it to solve their problems, answer questions, and it can lead to a lack of that critical thinking and problem solving skills if they rely too heavily on it and don't really check or look over the work that they get from it. Another concern is that human interaction. It might diminish the importance of human interaction and kind of lower communication in class as students become a bit more reliant on using chatbots or virtual assistants or ChatGPT. And it doesn't really replace that face-to-face interaction. And then again, our main thing is that people are worried about cheating, plagiarism. They'll copy and paste answers from ChatGPT without actually understanding the model there. So we can argue that there are drawbacks, but we can also argue that there are many potential benefits that are going to outweigh the potential drawbacks, the risks, and they can provide quick, personalized services and answers to students as long as they do a little bit of the legwork and check that it's going to be accurate. Other things that we've kind of picked up as well, data privacy, bias. The models are trained based on what we put in them, based on the people that create them. So there can be bias and discrimination in many cases. Same with our privacy and security. We've had it recently where a staff member had asked the students to create CVs using ChatGPT, which in respect is a really good idea. However, in theory, they were also asking the students to enter name, address, etc. So massive thing there where we were like, please do not put personal data in here because it will pose a threat to the security and the privacy there. So we would look to the kind of the more generic kind of information going in rather than personal stuff. So that's some of the problems that we can see already in AI and we know are there. When students are using this. So some of the examples that of AI that students are already probably using, even before ChatGPT, and we've heard of these and we've probably used them ourselves: chatbots, smart assistants, e-payments, algorithms in searching, media streaming. Netflix uses AI to recommend content. Our smart assistants that we all got at home, Google, Siri, Alexa, smart cars that can park themselves, facial recognition, text editors, and social media feeds are all using some form of AI. So students are using it in some respect anyway. We're just now kind of expecting them almost to be using the kind of more superpowered ChatGPT, Bing, Bard, those tools as well, as added extras. So how can we as educators really help our students use AI? So we know that it's been said many times, ChatGPT 3 is kind of the worst version of it. It's going to improve. It's going to be embedded in a lot of the tools that we use. Microsoft are looking at embedding it. Google will have it embedded. So how are we going to actually help our students use it? And I think this is where we kind of ask the students to explore and to encourage them to like ask questions, seek clarification, check things that they don't understand, come to you as an educator and say, well, I don't fully understand this, can you give me a hand with it? Also things like being able to flip the script, have them, you can create something with ChatGPT and have them identify, key points, key parts in the text, and improve and critique it themselves. Definitely, I would recommend, and I know we're talking about cheating, but actually encourage them to use it with their homework, their assignments, critique their work, and get them to ask it questions, whether or not it's, can you check this for spelling, or can you encourage me, what should I read next? Get them to do that as part of that practice of getting used to using it. Another one that we have is we at the college, we have a lot of students who English isn't their first language. Encourage them to use it to help improve their language skills. They can put some writing in and it can respond, they can ask for translation and it can help with that as well. And then look at that as a critical thinking exercise of, how well has it answered your question? Do you think it's an accurate representation of what the answer should be or not? And you can also encourage students to learn new subjects. So I've got a couple examples of those as well coming up in a second, Blue Peter style. So practical ideas that we've kind of entertained in the sphere, and we're kind of promoting these soon to our students, will be things like plagiarism detection, study plans, summarizing notes, memory cues, which is a fun one. I've got a fun example of that. Practice questions, inspiration, advice, help with their CVs. We've already had that running with our students. But other things they can do is some students have been using it actually during class time when their lecturer is presenting. They have been asking it questions. So rather than stopping the lecturer for something that maybe isn't necessary or not quite urgent, they've managed to ask questions during that time, get an answer, and then they can also ask again at the end of the class to clarify something. Other students have used it for motivation, so to try and help them with their studies. They're a little bit stuck, and then they would be able to check with their motivation there. Checking for resources, so being able to find out where other resources are available for new topics, new subjects. They can get answers with that, and also to cite itself. So once you've asked it a question, ask it to cite itself so that you're not the only one that is checking it. You're asking it to check itself. Okay, so this is my first example here. This should play.
Oh, it's playing for us now.
Is it? Perfect. Okay, so it is a GIF, so it'll just play, it'll come around again in a second and play again. But this was basically a memory cue. We used to do it when I was a student, where we would try and, you would say, I remember always the never eat shredded wheat for Northeast Southwest. And, if you ever learned guitar tabs, there was always one. And we used to try and come up with them in my courses when uni and at college. And this was for a biology course, and it was for the Krebs cycle. And I basically just asked the system to create a song. And it does it really well. It's maybe not the most memorable song, but it breaks down the different steps of the Krebs cycle, and it puts in like the molecules that are formed and all that kind of stuff, the energy transfer. And if you were to get a diagram of the Krebs cycle and compare it to the song, it would make sense to you as a student in biology. So it's a really great memory cue there for them to kind of get to grasp with something that's quite a complex thing there. The second example is, again, it's using a student coming to a new unit, support for play and learning and development. This is part of our HNC childcare unit. And I've just asked it to suggest books and some websites for me to look at. And again, it will just go ahead and it will find a list of books and a list of websites for me to go and actually explore my new unit. So this would be handy if I have an essay to write at the end of the year. I'd be able to go in and see that at the end of the year. And I think it got me a list of 5 books and 5 websites. I would probably ask it normally if I was a student to expand on that, give me a little bit more, and maybe even reflect what it's pointed out with if my lecturers provided a reading list, and find out if it's generated a similar list to what they have. And the good thing with this one is it actually did recommend some real books. I didn't get any pretend ones, which was nice. And some really nice websites as well for me to use. And then my last one, and it's something that we've probably all done as well, is asking it to critique work, whether it's our own work, whether we're doing a write-up, sending an email, putting something into a presentation, asking it to critique that. I was able to ask it to take student work. So with the permission of a lecturer, I took in a paragraph of a student's work that had to remediate. They'd submitted already. The lecturer had marked it and had said, well, this has actually needed some remediation. So what I did was I copy and pasted that in. And there's the passage there, and I've sent it away to ChatGPT. And this is then actually just giving them feedback based on that passage. So we've seen this before. It's not anything new, but it's getting students to think about, if I do need to remediate, and maybe I'm not too sure, the feedback that the lecturer's giving me is okay, but maybe I need a little bit more to get to that passing mark. What tools are available for me as a student? And something like this would be great, because it's going to break it down into much more broader sense of where I could work on this as a student. So it really did cover pretty much everything I asked it to cover, whether it was being able to expand on certain areas, or even just checking my grammar. It was able to do that. So potentially, as I go back in, I make those corrections, I submit again, I've passed. So that's where we're kind of looking at changing how students are looking at this, not looking at it as the tool for cheating, but looking at it as the tool for improving our work and how we can make those tweaks for passing. So what do students use ChatGPT for? So basically, asking a class, and I put out a little survey as well. I was able to speak with some students, and this is kind of the feedback that we got based on what they use it for. So the main one was using it instead of Googling. This was my favorite one here, using it instead of Googling. I thought that was brilliant. I loved that that's what the main use there was for students, that they were using it to speak about this. Students were using it during class. So the lecturer would be teaching and they could put in words, what does that word mean? What does this mean? That's what the student was using it for, because they weren't too sure about some of the terminology that the lecturer was using. So they were able to go in and find out during class without having to interrupt. We had students that were using this for a social media unit, and 2 of them there were using it to help them generate lists of hashtags for their social media course. So just being able to quickly get those lists available for their course to help them with their unit. And again, they kind of reiterated that they did that anyway using Google. They were just now using ChatGPT because it was quicker. So that's what they were kind of clearly saying, like we would do this using the website, using browsers, but we were looking at being able to do it much, much quicker using ChatGPT. And again, ChatGPT has been great for creating lists, helping with emails, helping with writing. So that's what currently our students or have been using it for. And again, we've not had too many conversations with our students yet. It's still early days, meeting with classes and finding students that are using it. But it was good to get that kind of, understanding of where they are seeing this and how they are using this tool. So we then asked as well in our little survey, who should be allowed to use ChatGPT? So we were looking at staff and students and kind of the opinions from students. who should be using it. So students were asked, do they think they should be allowed to use it? And 60% of the students asked said yes, 20 said no, and 20 said maybe. And with the maybes, they all seem to have the same stipulation of they believe that it could be used for certain things, but other things it shouldn't be. So essentially they were kind of saying, like, we believe we should be allowed to use it for studying, but we don't believe we should be allowed to use it for submitting essays, which is kind of the area that we want to push students into, and to have the opportunity to say, like, yes, use this tool as a support tool, as a guidance tool, as a tool to help critique work, but please don't use it as a plagiarism and as a cheating tool, if you will, like an essay mail or anything like that. So we were quite happy with the responses in that regards. We then also asked, do you think it should be used by staff? And again, we had a 60% yes, and we had 0% for no. So they do believe that staff should use it. And then under the maybe, again, it was kind of, most of the responses were around about not replacing lecturers. So students were very adamant that they believe that staff should be able to use it to support their teaching, but they don't believe it should replace lecturers. They wouldn't necessarily want to come in and find out it was an AI teaching them. They wanted a lecturer to be there, but the lecturer could potentially use the tools to help them. And then the last kind of thing we asked there with the students is what benefits do students see from using the AI tools? And we gave them a list that they could choose from, and they were able to pick multiples of these. And the main one seemed to be research and proofreading. But we did get a lot of people talking about study guides, classwork summaries, streamlining their own work, one or two on the motivation, and no one said that there were no benefits, which was ideal for us. So we were glad to see that none of the students believed there was just no benefit to using these kind of tools. So ideas, I think it's a very important thing that you do mention these to students, that they can use them effectively. So not just willy-nilly, they're able to effectively use this. Google has a really good video series where they introduce AI, and I think it is just on their Bard. It was on their Bard pages not that long ago, so whether or not it's still there. But it's adopting the tools so that they can help the students with their learning, transition, whether it's, translation, speech recognition, immersive reader style tools, help with writing, help with, being able to research, those kind of tools, introduce them in a really good way. I believe we should provide support. So it's something that I know that we'll be working on. We love our toolkits at North East Scotland College. We are creating a teacher toolkit for ChatGPT and AI. There will be a similar thing with a student facing toolkit to give them tips, instructions, prompts. We know a lot about prompting, but how can you do it effectively as a student is a really good one. So being able to offer them the advice and the guidance. And then if we could have staff to, monitor and check and look at the feedback there that the students are going to be able to give them. We would definitely encourage critical thinking. So being able to say to students, don't just take everything it says as a fact. Being able to say, right, this is what it's given me. Now, can I go and check this? It's similar to fake news. We had a module on it when I learned social media back in the day, and we had to learn about fake news. We would want students to effectively do the same thing here of fake information, make sure that it is accurate and that there's sources. And again, you can ask ChatGPT to cite itself. It can link you to a source, and that will very quickly point out whether or not it's a fake source or if it's a real source, because you'll be able to find it online. And then just last thing is that keeping up to date. So being able to have your kind of finger on the pulse, checking blogs, coming to events like this effectively will be able to help you and help students. And these things are going to be recorded. Have the recordings available so you can showcase parts of them to the students, to the staff, and being able to identify, Bard is relatively new. I've just been given access to it today. I'll have to keep up to date with that so I know what's going on. And a similar thing of just being aware of what's available and what your students could potentially be using. But again, that support, I think, is the key part there, being able to provide support, monitor what they're doing, and give feedback. So that is actually it for me with the presentation. I would like to have some discussion going on, so I will stop sharing my screen. There we go. Cool. And I can see the chat, and yeah, I will actually, so there's the toolkit there. David has lovingly put it into the chat for us. So again, this is something that I'm continuing to develop. I've got the staff side of it, and I couldn't quickly share actually. Yeah, so we've got ChatGPT for teaching at the moment. So lessons, grading, feedback, assessments at the moment in there, and we will be looking at adding student stuff relatively soon to that, of being able to support them with, just being able to get prompts for different subject areas and the best way to use it in many cases.
Amy, could I ask, what did you find was the recognition of ChatGPT? I mean, did students just generally know what it was?
Yeah, so the group that I went to go see actually were a computing class. So they were very keyed in, switched on, knew exactly what ChatGPT was and what it could be used for. They also were pretty aware that it's been around for a long time. So they were like, oh yeah, AI is this, they are this. So they were a very turned on class, because their lecturer, Chrissy, she does teach a little bit of an AI unit. So they were very clued up. But I do know that having spoke to someone at the Student Association, asked them to share my little survey with students, and in conversation with them, like very briefly, one student was like, oh, that's just the tool that's used for cheating. And I kind of explained that it's not just that, it's this. And again, it was someone who doesn't take computing, isn't fully aware, but was very adamant that they were never going to use it because they're not a cheater. And I kind of said, like, that's not necessarily the case. Some students will use it like that, but the students that do use it like that would cheat anyway, is my argument. They would, whether it's copying from someone's work, plagiarizing online, or an essay mill, we always have those students, regardless of the tools that are available. There's always that student. You can think back to, I remember being at school and very cleverly a girl reprinted her water bottle label with notes in the water bottle label. So that's the kind of student that if ChatGPT existed, they would be using it 100%. And so, yeah, there's always been innovative cheaters. They're always going to cheat regardless of the tools. However, the tool is not just for cheating, it's for so many other things. And I think it's just promoting it to students in that regard of saying, you don't need mom and dad to proofread anymore because the tool will proofread. You don't need to buy a subscription to Grammarly because there's a free tool that will do that. So it's getting that kind of stigma, because I think there's one or two people who aren't kind of on the pulse of it and just see it as that one tool that's used for cheating. So trying to change that narrative.
There was a comment in the chat that said, this is an opportunity to potentially free up lecture time for different human interactions, like more pastoral support or personalized learning support that is really needed now. I see the lecturer role evolving very quickly now in this direction. Is that a common sentiment expressed at NESCOL?
Definitely. I think for the people that have used it, they see it as, the great time saver, the great streamliner, the machine that's going to improve, workflows and stuff like that. So it's definitely one of how we've been looking at it and how we've been promoting it is, it's not replacing the lecturer, it's not replacing the student, it's replacing the admin of it all. So helping you, if it's a case of maybe you can't sit down and give a student who's needing to remediate one-to-one feedback. So you've given them quite generic feedback, but you can say to them, okay, this is your feedback from me. Now go and put this into ChatGPT and get better feedback so that you can improve. Because you've maybe got a class of 30 people and half of them need to remediate. You don't have time sometimes to sit one-on-one. If they then need more support, then you've managed to free up a little bit of time, especially when it's something quite simple of, you've missed one key point. You can expand on it in ChatGPT, get a little bit more information there. And kind of, in many cases, sometimes if students do that bit first, they might not need to remediate, and you can spend more time with students that are maybe, are struggling, or there's an accessibility issue there that you can address that with them. So I think for the staff that have started using it at the college, they've definitely managed to see like the key points of like, this is, going to help improve their practice. It's not changing it, but it's definitely improving it.
There was another comment written by Raymond in the chat that says, the word cheating has been used a lot today. I wonder if we need to reframe this to be poor academic practice, so that going forward, students could be using AI for good academic practice, but could fall into the trap of poor academic practice like other sources if they don't critically analyze the output, don't reference, etc. What kind of guidance are you giving students at the moment, or did your lecturer give students in that social media class?
Yeah, so we have looked at the guidance. Actually, it was a bit of worry with our quality department about academic integrity and student work and stuff. So we have given guidance. We've reminded them, no matter what they submit at the college, they all kind of, as part of the student agreement at the college, you agree that anytime you submit something, it is your own work that you're submitting. So we've kind of, not necessarily, we haven't rejigged that, but what we have said is we've reiterated it in a greater way of, just because that this tool exists, you still have to, submit your own work. It has to be work that you've produced yourself in many cases. So whether or not we go down the route of, I know Joe has shared a really great resource with their kind of AI guidance, where they talk about being able to reference it. I totally think that we will probably end up going down that route in many cases, because you will be able to use it to get information. But we haven't quite gone that step yet. We have just kind of reiterated the, as part of the academic integrity, you are submitting your own work. Please agree that this is your own work, just to kind of reinforce that students should be producing their own work and not submitting anything that isn't theirs as their own.
Jason has a question that he's written into the chat, but I'm not going to read it this time. Jason can ask it himself.
Thank you. That's it's about, it's referring back to John Laird's comment earlier on about knowledge-based approaches to assessment, and I still think there's a mindset prevalent about the assessment task being given an answer to the question. Therefore, it's very difficult to see what cheating is if you give an answer, the right answer, of course, to the question, being able to assure of that. You have some way to go in changing that understanding of what assessment is.
I do agree. I'm not a big fan of like, there's you get asked a question and there's always one answer. I'm not usually a big fan of those. I prefer, like, what is your understanding of this? Because it's asking someone to take what you've given them and apply it to their own knowledge base, their own experience. So I already think that the way assessment is done isn't ideal. I understand that there is a time and place. There is usually one correct answer, for certain things. Certain things are done by guidelines and regulations, and that there is only one correct answer. But for a lot of assessment, to just churn out an answer based on a single question, you're going to have about 4 or 5 students that have very similar things. And that's where, it's harder to tell whether it's plagiarism or not in many cases, or, Jimmy's copied Jane. So I do think how assessment is done, I do think we need to move away from that. But again, a lot of that's set with, SQA and other kind of awarding bodies. So I think they will definitely have to have a bigger conversation about assessment and how it's done. But I've always not been a big fan of this is a question, give an answer. I prefer, here's, you know, something or a scenario, or here's this. What is your take on this? What's your understanding of this? And give me kind of your experience based on this. I prefer those kind of questions myself. So yeah, definitely. I think there is going to be a big movement away from how assessment is currently done.
One thing that strikes me about some of your student responses to your questionnaire survey was the fact that they saw it as a cheating tool. I just wonder, how do you differentiate between ChatGPT giving you advice or an idea or a sample essay versus me just working with other people in my class who've got the decency to sort of spend a bit of time with me and explain how they're approaching the assignment, might even share. I just wonder if that's part of what we're discussing now, where we get the advice and how we accept that. Is ChatGPT just another voice amongst all the people around us? Sorry, that was a very long-winded thing.
No, I totally know where you're coming from, though. It's, you know, if you have sat down with, you know, a tutor or a peer, or, you know, you've sat down with your lecturer and you've taken what they've said and you've put it into your own work, you know, how is that any different from taking ChatGPT or something from a blog or journal? You know, it's you know, it's definitely one of the ones where I think it's almost like a kind of a leeway needs to be given of, you know, just because, you know, you've used an expert to help you in many cases doesn't mean you've cheated. So yeah, it is definitely a you know, you're going to know yourself, and I think someone already brought it up in the room, you know, students that are doing well in one thing but are failing elsewhere, you know there's an issue there. But if they're doing well overall and they've happened to use ChatGPT to kind of boost a mark by a couple of points, you know, they're already doing quite well. So they've used an expert in something to help them improve somewhere. And so I don't see it as a bad thing. And I don't see it as a bad thing if you're sitting with your peers and you're discussing. But yeah, no, I definitely think it's a lot of conversations going to come from this. I wouldn't be surprised if the class reps and student associations meet up over different colleges and talk about it at some point as well, because I reckon there's going to be a massive thing with students discussing this very, very soon. So it'll be interesting to see what comes from anything like that.
Okay, right, Amy, thanks so much for your session. I know you had to pull it together in short notice. I really appreciate you participating today.